on the plane coming here because I do feel like, I think we gotta change the narrative.
For years, Milan Harris stayed silent, completely silent. She didn't clap back when the blogs painted her as Meek Mill's side piece, didn't rant when the world learned she was pregnant, and didn't spill when their relationship crumbled while he moved on like nothing happened. Instead, Milan played it classy, focused on her fashion empire, and made it crystal clear she wasn't chasing clout. But insiders whisper a whole different story. Behind that polished image, Milan was carrying a weight way heavier than just a breakup. Because while she was showing love to Meek in public, behind closed doors, she was allegedly uncovering something dark, something that made her question the very machine that fueled his rise to fame. Sources say as Meek's career blew up and his legal battles turned him into a political talking point, Milan started hearing things, quiet whispers, shady patterns, certain names, and disturbing claims of so-called rituals that new faces were expected to go through just to survive in the industry. And one phrase kept popping up everywhere: training sessions. Now sure, it sounds innocent at first. Artists get trained all the time in vocals, branding, stage presence. But according to Milan's circle, this wasn't about skills. This was code for something way darker. They say training meant secret initiation tests meant not to build, but to break, to push boundaries, force loyalty, and trap artists, especially women, in a cycle of control that they couldn't easily escape. And here's the shocking part. Milan allegedly found herself closer to these so-called sessions than she ever wanted to be. No, she's never accused Meek of taking part, never directly pointed a finger at him. But those same insiders insist she couldn't ignore the reality, that he knew. And don't get it twisted, this isn't just another Diddy-type rumor video. What's being suggested is way deeper.
I feel like we were in a struggle, but we didn't know that we were in a struggle. I feel like when you're in it, sometimes you don't understand until you get out of it. It was just what we knew.
Insiders claim Meek Mill wasn't just around the industry. He saw things. He was in those rooms, or at least close enough to the man running them. And now, Milan isn't out here trying to scorch the earth, but she's definitely not holding back anymore. People close to her say she's finally ready to talk, not for clout, not for revenge, but because she believes there are still women caught in it right now, trapped in the same training system that once forced her into silence. See, Milan's come-up wasn't like most women tied to a rap star. She wasn't chasing a record deal or hustling for a studio session. She was already a boss. The creative force behind Milano Di Rouge, a streetwear brand rocking on celebrities before Meek ever stepped into her life. That independence set her apart. She didn't need Meek's cosign to feel validated. But once they got close, she stepped straight into his world, and with it, into an industry culture she never imagined existed. It started off small, an after-party, background noise, a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear, a couple of powerful men cracking a joke that landed wrong, something about testing new artists, followed by smirks that made it clear they weren't talking about music lessons. At first, she brushed it off. Every industry's got a shady side, right? But the deeper she went, the harder it became to ignore. That same phrase, training sessions, kept circling back. Nobody ever explained it outright, but they didn't have to. According to Milan's circle, she started piecing it together bit by bit, like the time she met a young woman backstage, shaking, teary-eyed, clearly disturbed. When Milan asked what happened, the girl whispered she'd been through it, and then refused to say another word.
My mom, she had my sister at 15. She dropped out of high school. She ended up going back and getting her GED, and she went to college to become a registered nurse. And I was telling my followers that because she made that sacrifice, it allowed me to dream. And I said, whoever...
A stylist once pulled Milan to the side and warned her, never leave certain rooms alone. That stuck with her. Then came another chilling moment, a conversation Meek allegedly had with another artist where the phrase, "It's just part of the game," was thrown out so casually, it sent a shiver down her spine. Nobody ever sat Milan down and spelled things out, but she's sharp. Too sharp to ignore the patterns. She connected the dots, and once she saw the full picture, she couldn't unsee it. From what insiders claim, these so-called training sessions weren't just shady, they were calculated. They weren't about helping artists grow, they were about leverage. Breaking someone early so they'd never fight back later, forcing them into situations that could be recorded, weaponized, and used to blackmail, or just straight up shame them into silence. And here's the wild part. It wasn't just random execs pulling strings. Sources allege some of the biggest names in the game were involved. We're talking power players with Billboard hits year after year, producers with Grammy plaques on their walls, and artists who front like mentors in public, but allegedly act like gatekeepers in private. Now, Milan has never pointed the finger at Meek directly. She's never said he brought women into those spaces, but sources close to her claim she believed he knew these rooms existed and chose not to speak on it. Whether that was fear, protecting his own career, or loyalty to the wrong circle, she couldn't say. But to Milan, silence was still complicity. So, publicly, she kept it cute. Ex-girlfriend, the fashion boss, glowing through her pregnancy. But privately, she was realizing just how much power in this industry doesn't come from talent or hustle. It comes from intimidation, control, and the secrets nobody dares to say out loud. The more Milan listened, the clearer it became. Those whispers weren't just gossip. They were warnings meant for her, too. To outsiders, training sessions sound harmless enough, like artist development, image consulting, choreography lessons, maybe some media prep. But according to what Milan allegedly pieced together, that phrase was nothing but a polite mask for something way darker. Behind closed doors, training meant one thing: obedience. It wasn't about talent. It wasn't about potential. It was about testing how far you'd bend once the industry got its hooks in you. Insiders claim it usually started the same way. A newcomer gets invited to a late-night meeting. No big event, no flashing lights, just a small circle. Always at least one person with serious power, plus a couple others to make it feel casual, safe. But before the artist even realized what was happening, the vibe shifted, drinks were poured, conversations turned suggestive, and suddenly, that meeting didn't feel like business anymore. And then came the so-called initiation. For some, it meant being pressured into intimate encounters with people they barely knew, sometimes even more than one at a time. Others were allegedly forced into humiliating acts, all disguised as breaking you in or seeing if you could handle the lifestyle. According to stories Milan heard, these sessions were always recorded. Not polished, not professional, but shaky, grainy footage filmed just well enough to be used later if anyone ever stepped out of line. The unspoken message couldn't be clearer. You belong to us now. And the most disturbing part? The people orchestrating this weren't just nameless handlers lurking in the shadows. Insiders whisper it was industry veterans, label executives with long resumes, and even respected artists who act like mentors in public. But behind the scenes, they were allegedly the gatekeepers running the most predatory game in the business. In some cases, these so-called sessions weren't even about physical abuse. They were about psychological chains. The real trick was getting artists to witness things they should have never seen, forcing them to carry that knowledge like a loaded weapon pointed at their own heads. Because once you've sat in a room where careers get traded like poker chips and someone's dignity is tossed around like pocket change, you either play the game or you vanish. Take MIA, for example. Industry whispers claim she brushed up against this exact system, and look what happened. Her career took a nosedive the moment she stopped playing along. Now, Milan never claimed she was personally forced into these sessions, but insiders insist she became hyper-aware of when they were happening around her. She allegedly noticed the signs. Women showing up bright-eyed and excited, then days later returning with empty stares, hollow like something inside them had been stolen. She noticed young male artists who once spoke up with fire in their voices, suddenly turning into yes men, nodding at everything, their edge completely gone. The scariest part. Once you got pulled into the system, there was no walking away clean. Sure, you might still blow up as a star, but every hit single, every big check came with a shadow hanging over it. The knowledge that the wrong person could drop footage, expose receipts, or snatch it all away in seconds. And during her years by Meek's side, sources say Milan saw enough to know this wasn't tied to one label or one clique. This was bigger, a whole network, a code, an invisible structure running deep through the industry. From the outside, Milan's life looked like a win. Milano Di Rouge was blowing up as a respected streetwear brand. She was with one of the biggest rappers alive. She had celebrity clients, a growing fan base, and eventually a child on the way. But the glossy image wasn't the full picture. According to those close to her, Milan knew how dangerous it was to even whisper about what she'd allegedly uncovered. These training sessions weren't just dirty little secrets. They were part of a powerful system run by people with enough money, connections, and influence to make or break anyone instantly. In this industry, problems don't just get fixed, they vanish. Careers disappear overnight, reputations get shredded in hours, and in the darkest cases, lives can be put at risk. Milan had already seen how fast someone could be erased from the game. One bad headline, one viral rumor, and suddenly your name's scrubbed from history. She knew that if she spoke out while still tied to Meek, she wouldn't just be gambling with her future, she'd be gambling with his too. Whether or not he was directly involved, his connections ran too deep. One wrong word from her could have landed like a grenade in the middle of powerful circles.
It's a blessing to be fearless. Like, it's a blessing to not fear anything and just know that every obstacle I'm faced with,
And then came the personal shift. Milan was pregnant. Everything changed. Her priority became protecting her son before he even entered the world. That meant choosing stability over chaos, silence over drama. She kept her head down, grew her fashion empire, and did everything to avoid being painted as the bitter ex or the loud troublemaker. Friends say she convinced herself it was safer to bury the truth than to risk becoming a target. But time has a way of changing things. Over the past few years, more women in entertainment have started breaking their silence. Stories that once got laughed off as gossip are now being taken dead serious, especially after Diddy's arrest and release. From R&B singers to global pop stars, the patterns become impossible to ignore. Sudden fame, sudden silence, unexplained breakdowns, and those airtight NDAs that bury the truth under legal threats. And for Milan, the deja vu was chilling. Different faces, different industries, but the same tactics, the same whispers, the same initiations disguised as golden opportunities. What finally pushed her over the edge, insiders say, wasn't her own trauma. It was watching a new generation walk straight into the same trap. Seeing younger women smiling on Instagram from studios and after parties, using the same coded language she once overheard in passing. It hit too close. Milan had always told herself it wasn't her fight, but motherhood changes everything. Once you've got a child to protect, watching others step into the same darkness you escaped doesn't sit right. It eats at you. Suddenly, the thought of someone's daughter, or even one day her own child, being led into one of those rooms wasn't just disturbing, it was unbearable. Milan hasn't come out swinging with names or accusations, but the way she's begun speaking, slow, careful, deliberate, screams one thing loud and clear: she's not protecting this system forever. And here's the wild part: her alleged account doesn't sound like some one-off nightmare. If you've been watching the music industry long enough, you've seen the same eerie pattern. Raw talent bursts onto the scene with fire in their eyes and dreams bigger than life. But overnight, something changes. Some artists get their big break, only to vanish just as fast. Others stick around, but they're not the same. That spark, that edge, it's gone, replaced with a quiet compliance, like they're walking on invisible chains. Look at the history. Why did Britney Spears spiral right after her conservatorship saga? What's really been going on with Justin Bieber's constant struggles? Is Ariana Grande truly fine, or just playing along? And Kanye, everyone says it's just fame, making him unravel. But what if the truth runs deeper than fame? Insiders have whispered for years about a shadow system, not just in hip-hop, but in pop, R&B, even Hollywood itself. A hidden network of executives, producers, and insiders who allegedly control the keys to opportunity. You want that record deal? That movie role? That sponsorship check? Then you play their game. And that game, according to Milan's circle, looks an awful lot like those so-called training sessions, not workshops, not artist development, but humiliations dressed as lessons, manipulations disguised as opportunities, and in some cases, outright exploitation. The alleged goal, not just feeding egos at the top, but keeping newcomers in line, dependent, and too scared to ever break free. Once someone's compromised, they're easy to control. And that's the whole point. A career built on someone else's terms is a career you'll never truly own. And this isn't just speculation. History already shows the pattern. In the last decade alone, multiple lawsuits have laid it out. Artists pressured into sexual favors in exchange for contracts or protection. Some of the biggest moguls in music have been accused of hosting so-called freak-off parties, where young talent shows up for opportunity but ends up pushed into something else entirely. And almost every time, the accusations fade, buried under hush money and ironclad NDAs. For Milan, not being an aspiring artist gave her a kind of shield. She could walk in and out of those rooms without being directly targeted. But that didn't mean she was blind. She allegedly watched the system trap others. Singers, too, broke to say no, producers desperate for placements, dancers willing to do whatever it took just to stay on tour. To them, survival meant submission. And here's where Meek's world ties in. His rise wasn't just about bangers on the charts. It was backed by powerful labels, influential cosigns, and a network stretching far beyond Philly. Being in his orbit gave Milan a front row seat, close enough to see the glamorous surface, but also the ugly machine working underneath. So even speaking carefully, even without naming names, she's putting a spotlight on a culture that thrives in the shadows. A culture disguised as just the industry, where silence is rewarded and the wrong move can cost more than just your career. It can cost your freedom, your safety, maybe even your life. And whether Milan's voice sparks the conversation the world needs or gets drowned out like so many before her, all depends on whether people are finally ready to believe that the music they love might be built on something much darker than beats and rhymes. Because if what she's alleging is true, then these training sessions aren't just whispers. They're the real price of admission. And that's where we'll leave it for now. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe if you want more deep dives like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next one.